Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Shuhan He, and I am here to talk about emoji for the medical community. I am an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School in the Department of Internal Medicine and the Department of Emergency Medicine. I work at the Lab of Computer Science, and I am the program director for the Master of Science in Data Analytics at the MGH Institute of Health Professions. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my talk today. I'm going to first start with the idea and concept of emoji and its importance to the medical community and where we are today. There are two parts to this talk. The first is the language of emoji and how patients today, especially as advocates and as representatives of diseases and for patients, are talking about and using emoji. And the second part of my talk is about patient-reported outcomes and the importance of emoji to capture better sentiment, feeling, and data from patients so we can do a better job treating patients and providing better care. The first part of my talk is that I want to convince you that emoji have a significant medical importance. The Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, is one of the most prestigious journals in medicine. And in 2021, myself, along with two colleagues, Deborah Lai and Jennifer Lee, published an article called Emoji for the Medical Community, the Challenges and Opportunities. What this article discussed was where we are today with emoji. As most of you know, with emoji, we have this fundamental interoperability problem. And this is something that's become very important in medicine in the last decade, where we've become digitized on electronic health records. So in the 70s and 90s, there was this big problem with interoperability, and Unicode was set up to create emojis that could then basically create and talk to other programs and other languages between different systems. The first part of that was in languages, whether that was English, German, and Latin. The second part was characters, so Chinese, Arabic, and emoji. And then fundamentally below all that was the programming language that underlined all that called Unicode, right? Unicode is becoming a fundamentally important part of medicine today. And let me give you a quick brief timeline. In 2000, the first emoji proposal was sent out from Unicode. And in 2017, the first brain emoji was created. This led to a fundamental extreme excitement in medicine because it meant that there was some representation, particularly among some specific parts of the organs. But in 2019, we also then saw representation of the heart and lungs. In 2021, 2022, and today in 2024 is where we are today, after we saw the approval of the anatomical heart and lung. I was part of that team and lucky to be part of it. We advocated for these heart and lung, and the excitement afterwards was astounding in medicine because we finally saw that people could see that if they had asthma or if they had lung diseases, that they could be represented via this idea of a lung, right? And the Boston Globe wrote about this. So today, where are we in that? We now today have an emoji for the anatomical heart, similar to the character of Chinese, the Xing emoji, with the Unicode code point, the U plus F 5FC3. We are advocating for a more comprehensive set of emoji, such as the intestine emoji, and that does not have a Unicode code point yet. So there are existing emoji that are relevant to medicine. And this was a question that comes up a lot is, well, what are the emoji that we do want to see? We do see a lot of accessibility emoji, such as hearing aids or walking cane, or representation of physicians and nurses and healthcare providers, and so on the stethoscope. And we do obviously have the heart and lung and other pathogens such as viruses and bacteria. However, we believe that there should be new candidates to fully represent the organs and represent the body. In particular, the stomach, the spine, the liver, the kidney, and things that are fundamentally something that we all have as people and as human beings, right? And let me give you an example of this is why we feel this is so important within medicine and the kind of community that's been supportive of this. The kidney and liver are two emoji that we in medicine have really tried to advocate for. There are existing emoji for beer and beer clinking glasses and wine and sake and champagne and martinis and Mai Tai and milk, tea, Coca-Cola or soft drinks, juice, coconut drinks, and ice and water ice. All the alcohol and fluid in the body is processed by the kidney and liver. But the kidney liver does not exist within the current emoji context. And so we think it's important that if there are that many types of fluids and alcohols, the processes in the body that represent and process all that fluid and alcohol may want to be represented. Let me give you another example. The gastroenteritis system, intestines and stomach. The intestines and stomach process food, such as food from existing emoji like shrimp or donuts, spaghetti, cookies, bread, meat, cheese, peanuts, and vegetables. All that goes into the stomach and intestine. And there is even a poop emoji, but today we still have no stomach and intestine emoji. And that's something we are advocating for. So we have an organization called the Medical Emoji Organization that has been trying to advocate and collect letters. We collect endorsements from medical organizations, look at online engagement, and even look at federal organizations to try and advocate for a federal unified set of organ emoji. We've gotten a significant amount of success, especially from the representative organizations. The kidney has been endorsed by the National Kidney Foundation, AAKP, ASN, GLOMCON, RPA, all these very important organizations. The liver, the stomach, the intestines have also been endorsed by ASLD, AGA, and these very important organizations that fundamentally represent patients and advocacy of physicians who are trying to get these emoji approved. The press response has been very positive as well. We've been lucky to be featured in Fast Company and The Verge, and we are trying and continuing to advocate for these emoji today. The second part of my talk is called Emoji as a Patient-Reported Outcome. This is something that is something super exciting to me because it is representative of the digital transformation of medicine. I work, as a reminder, in the lab of computer science, and digital medicine and data have been a very important part of how we have provided better care in the last decade. Let me give you some background on why it matters to making sure that we can deliver better, faster, and safer care to patients all around the world. First of all, I want to convince you that emoji have a significant scientific importance and therefore a critical data problem. Also in JAMA, a similar journal as the first part of my talk, we published a paper called Comparison of an Emoji-Based Visual Analog Scale with a numeric rating scale for pain assessment. Let's talk about what that means and unpack that. The current healthcare model is something we generally call fee-for-service. When you see a physician or you see a provider, and oftentimes you do a procedure. Let's say you break your leg and we repair the knee, or repair the leg, or we put a knee in place. We do something called procedural billing. This is what happens when we do a procedure. There's something called a code, an ICD-10 code, or a CPT code. And there's some sort of funding and payment structure attached to that code. A lot of the healthcare reforms over the last decade have been to shift away from that, because that model actually incentivized probably some of the wrong things, which is to do more for people without necessarily making them feel better. So we shifted towards something called the Accountable Care Organization, or ACOs. ACOs basically did something different. What they did was they said, we will pay you a set amount of fee to take care of patients and make them feel better. But then the question naturally arose, how do you measure how somebody feels? So they get measured by something called patient-reported outcomes, or PROs. And that was basically the creation of what we call value-based payment models. And those value-based payment models rely on this fundamental technology that we can measure and assess how someone feels. Because at the end of the day, as physicians, as healthcare providers, we want to be able to see that somebody can take a walk with their children, play soccer better, feel better in the morning. Those are the most important things, not how many procedures we're doing or how expensive the new shiny intervention is. What matters is making people feel better, right? At lower cost. So that meant that we had the one really fundamental important question that we all want to know when you see a provider, which is, how are you feeling? So think about it this way. When you look at an app or your medical records or electronic medical records today, within it are information about your blood pressure, your pulse, your weight, your lab values, your imaging results, but never is there a documentation about how are you feeling? How was my sadness level today? How was my happiness? How was my strength? None of that is going into digital records because there lacks the ability to measure. So there's something was created, and this was in the 2010s, called the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or Trust Fund. This is something that was created by Congress as part of the Affordable Care Act in 2010 that has dispersed millions of dollars to try and answer this fundamental question of patient-reported outcomes. So the history that in the 2010 Affordable Care Act, they wanted to help reform a lot of this fee-for-service model. And therefore, in order to measure how patients feel in accountable care organizations, they created the PCORI, or PCORI, and to measure patient-reported outcomes. So today we have these patient-reported outcomes that do lots of things, and they measure lots of different things. They measure things like symptoms. How are you feeling? How is your headache? How is your back pain? Also, function, physical, or emotional, or your social life. All of these things, pros, are used to do something called patient-reported outcomes and value-based care. So tailor patient therapies to improve outcomes, to improve patient and physician communication, and to improve quality, because that's what at the end of the day, what we want to do. So here's a couple examples of patient-reported outcomes. There's a verbal pain rating scale. You can do a no pain when you look at this scale, all the way to I have the worst pain in my life and please treat me, doctor. There are numeric pain scales. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how do you feel today? And the very common one, the Wong-Baker-Faces pain rating scale. You'll see these in pediatricians' offices. These are extremely popular. And this is something we call the visual analog scale, to help us visually take a look and to represent how we feel. Now, within this subset of visual analog scales, there are hundreds of the different types, because a lot of different attempts towards digitization of these visual analog scales have been attempted. Things like, just a few examples, the smiley meter, or the 6 faces scale, or the affect button or LEM tool. All of these visual analog scales try to measure different things of how somebody feels, and particularly with digital outcomes. So when we try to do this, we have seen this problem of that a lot of these organizations that have created this technology have actually created very expensive licensing fees. For example, one of these organizations assessed for a study $5,000 per year in order to use these studies. So we asked this question: can we take a more fundamental approach, perhaps something open source, free, digital, that is available to everybody in the world, and we can measure how and ask, how do you feel today? Because at the end of the day, what we need is data. And when you have data or something that is digital, you can do things like measure very, very precisely or very subtly, things that we can never see or measure before. So the emoji scale happens to be this free, open source, and digital scale that is interoperable, that can be used by any language, that can go on mobile, on electronic medical records, on PCs, on Macintosh, whatever device it might be. It's an exciting and extremely interoperable open access platform. And so what we had to do was prove that what was validated and used in medicine today was similar to something that could be like an emoji scale. So we took the Wong-Baker-Faces pain rating scale. This is how it works. And it's trademarked and it's on paper. It's not on mobile devices, right? And we compared it to the emoji scale. And we said, are these the same? Is this valid? Are we truly measuring in patients real data so that we can accurately assess pain, give the right medications, make sure we give the right treatments, procedures, make sure that people are feeling better afterwards? We have to really make sure we prove this. It's important. So we did a study and we published this paper in JAMA. And we looked at the emoji scale, and we looked at them exactly at 02468, just like the Wong-Baker scale. And this was the Unicode and the short names of all those emoji, okay? And we called this the Emoji-Based Visual Analog Scale, EBVAS. So we did a study at Mass General in Boston here, a prospective observational study in the intensive care unit. We looked at emoji-based visual analog scales and compared it to numerical rating scales, the number scales, because that is how we all think of numerical scales. Every nurse asks patients, how do you feel? And we wanted to see if it was equivalent. We asked our patients rate your pain on the emoji scale and then the number scale, and then rate your pain on the number scale and the visual analog scale. And we wanted to make sure they were the same. So we got IRB for the study, and we went to go ask around all these patients. And here's what we showed. We surveyed 100 patients, and we had all these different kinds of pain. Didn't matter what it was. It was abdominal pain, chest pain, back pain, pain associated with an injury, like, let's say a stab wound. And we basically showed that there was almost a perfect agreement between the emoji scale and the numerical rating scale. Okay. So what does that mean? What that meant was that this is very, very strong evidence that that emoji could serve as a visual analog scale that anybody could use, that we could all use to measure patients in the standard way, right? Just like the Wong-Baker scale. But our next approach really is to think about, can we expand this? Can we use the other emoji to validate and show that we really can do pretty amazing things? Our next part of this also is that we want to do the standard visual analog scale to measure things like pain quality. Is your pain sharp, stabbing, fiery, thunder? And also give you multiple options. And one example why this is important is for strokes. Oftentimes, stroke patients cannot speak and they need to point. And this can be a really important tool for us to understand where people's pain, sensation, or perceptions are. We have many different ideas, for example, pain quality, or when we say chest pain, oftentimes somebody will say, if they're having a heart attack, feels like there's an elephant sitting on my chest. And that can be a very interesting use of pain descriptors. And the most exciting part of this is the data analysis part of it. We know that we fundamentally have a data problem, that when you have a lot of language within electronic medical records, let's say somebody texts us on a mobile phone, when you're communicating with a patient, I feel with the sad emoji, loud crying face, sanxing, which is the Chinese for sad. There's something called interoperability or semantic interoperability. And this is something I work on for clinical informatics in medicine. Because at the end of the day, when you translate all these together, you translate them into the same language. And that gives you the ability to take whatever language it might be, English, emoji, Chinese, or even vital signs with a heart rate of 130, and put them together to form some sort of meaning that someone may be sad, that they may be suicidal, that they may need some intervention, that their friends are, maybe need counseling. So this is something that's important for us to be able to start to measure these things in a more fine-tuned way, and potentially use a lot of artificial intelligence in the next phase of our research to really understand semantic interoperability when it comes to context of emotions and how people are feeling physically, emotionally, and their well-being. To give you context of this, many emoji actually use something called the Likert t-test. The most complicated way they do this is to measure two groups, sick or not sick. That's something called Likert t-test, okay? We can do something called support vector machines, something much more complicated, because we have massive amounts of data to measure a baseline and measure how someone is off the baseline if they're depressed, or if they're anxious, or if they're feeling different than usual. That is an amazing power that gives us an amazing ability to do all sorts of research to make people feel better, to better measure a lot of diseases that we have a hard time measuring. And so that's the exciting future of what emoji allows us to do in medicine, and why we're so excited about emoji as a medical community. So thank you for coming to my talk today. I really appreciate it. We're doing a lot of work on data analysis. We're doing a lot of work pushing and really getting this out, the word out about emoji and the ability to measure data. And so thank you for coming to talk, and certainly feel free to ask me questions. We're here to kind of assist and think about how ways we can collaborate to do better within medicine and using emoji today. Thank you.